Hello?
Luigi's Mansion is one of those games people remember as cozy, charming, and almost untouchable. Nintendo doing something very different from its norm and getting away with it. And honestly, a lot of that reputation is deserved. I'm not sure how this one eluded me for over 25 years, but playing it for the first time ever, what surprised me the most wasn't how well it holds up visually, it was how quickly the game sometimes gets in its own way. I love the atmosphere. I love the personality. I love how focused and compact it is. But even in a 6-hour playthrough, the controls and late-game backtracking create friction that feels completely unnecessary to me. So, the question isn't whether Luigi's Mansion is still charming, it absolutely is. The real question is whether the charm is strong enough to carry design choices that feel more stubborn than clever. I finished the game with an E rank, enjoyed most of my time with it, and still walked away thinking this could have been something a little bit more special. Let's rewind to 2001. The Nintendo GameCube launched in September 2001 in Japan and November 2001 in North America. The North American launch came with titles like Crazy Taxi, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, and Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2. However, it's safe to say that the most widely remembered launch title was Luigi's Mansion. While the previous two consoles both launched with a Mario platformer, Nintendo did something quite different this time, launching with a Luigi puzzle game. The gamble paid off, and Luigi's Mansion received mostly positive critical reception and ultimately sold over 3.3 million copies. Now that we have a little background here, let's get into my thoughts on Luigi's Mansion. First, I'll start with the graphics. I have to admit that the graphics in this game are one of the parts that I enjoyed the most. When I booted the game up, I actually expected the game to look much worse than it did. Having not played an original GameCube game since probably Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, I was expecting a lot more pixelation here, but was pleasantly surprised by a very nice looking and rounded model of Luigi. This surprise only continued throughout the entire game, where many of the ghosts that Luigi runs across have a ton of personality and their own visual style. While there are only about 10 or so different kinds of regular enemies, the mini-bosses and regular bosses had a lot of charm and character, from a rotund pink ghost uncontrollably chowing down in a small dining room, to 3 toy soldiers chasing Luigi around a room trying to hit him with a quart gun. The basic graphic effects and backgrounds I also found charming. While most of the rooms in the mansion look how you would expect a haunted mansion to look, I enjoyed the designer's choices of having many different themed rooms, from a cold storage to a workout room. One thing that really impressed me was when Luigi is required to catch a certain item in his vacuum and then shoot it into the far-off distance at a background object. Seeing Luigi in the room he's in, while also having an in-game Game Boy Color on screen, had me putting myself back into 2001 for a while to try to imagine how I would have thought about seeing that for the first time back then. The fact that Luigi communicates with EGAD and also has both an inventory and in-game map on the Game Boy is really cool, and I love the way that it was visually incorporated. Overall, I can say that the graphics, style, and presentation are my favorite things about this game. Next, I'll talk about the music and audio. Overall, the audio design is high quality, but it doesn't have enough variation to stay interesting over long stretches. There are moments where the music and sounds really shine, like during heated boss battles, or even just the little nuances of how the vacuum sounds, or how the environments sound when interacted with. Wooden furniture shakes under pressure. Getting a treasure chest sounds remarkably like another game that you might have heard of. And the sound of coins and loot flying all over the floor is something that anyone can appreciate. However, the audio can sometimes also get very boring and monotonous. Hearing Luigi whistle over and over again while trying to solve a puzzle, or Luigi yelling out for Mario every time you try to interact with an object and aren't squarely in front of it, can get very annoying over time. I don't know why Nintendo decided to make the interact button also the default to yelling for Mario, but I wish they wouldn't have. Sometimes the ghost shrieks also get annoying and repetitive, especially when there are a lot of enemies on the screen. When the music itself is playing though, I found myself generally enjoying that aspect of the game. The music intensifies when trying to catch ghosts, and that definitely brings a sense of urgency and excitement to the fight. A lot of the spooky or haunted themes are very fun and innocent, and I liked hearing the pipe organ music as Luigi heads down yet another hallway to unlock yet another door. Alright, let's talk about the gameplay. Luigi's Mansion is about the most Ghostbusters thing I've ever seen to hit a console, and that includes the actual Ghostbusters games. This is a third-person puzzle game where the player takes control of Luigi, who ends up in a large haunted mansion looking for his brother Mario. A couple of minutes into the game, we are armed with a ghost vacuum and are on our way to liquidate the ghost population. Here's the general flow of Luigi's Mansion. The player is in one of 4 general areas with a certain set of rooms being in that area. Luigi's main goal is to find and solve many boss rooms or other themed rooms in order to get a treasure chest that may contain loot or a key to another room in the mansion. This leads to more mini bosses and ultimately culminates in the boss of the current area. Structurally, the game is very linear, but moment to moment, it often feels aimless. There is typically no information on how to solve puzzles within each room outside of creative thinking. However, the general formula of trying to pound or vacuum suck every object in sight will normally lead to a favorable outcome. In one room, you may need to use the power of fire to de-thaw a mini-boss, and in another room, you may need to use the water power to wake up a sleeping mini-boss. Because of the limited options available, the game ends up being quite short and predictable, though toward the end there is an egregious amount of backtracking. I will say that the thing I found the most frustrating with Luigi's Mansion was the controls. I understand what Nintendo was aiming for here, but in practice it often feels more frustrating than tense. When Luigi goes to suction a ghost, it will flail all over the screen, and the only way to make progress is to shove the joystick in the opposite direction that the ghost is pulling, which also controls Luigi's general movement. The problem with this is that the player effectively has little to no control over Luigi unless intentionally releasing the suction. I also found that sometimes turning Luigi is very clunky. When fighting a mini-boss and other things are happening, like toxic shrooms or other ghosts trying to attack you, it feels like the player is at the mercy of RNG. There are a couple of instances where the room itself has traps that deal 20 damage to Luigi, and the player has nearly zero control over avoiding them without stopping vacuuming, such as the cold room. That being said, I still enjoyed playing through the game, despite how it may sound, and I'm interested in checking out the sequels to see how the gameplay evolved or changed over time. Now normally I would have a section here about the story, but there really isn't much to talk about in that department, so I'm just lumping it in with my overall thoughts. Basically, Luigi and Mario meet up at a mansion for a contest where the mansion itself is the prize, only for Luigi to arrive at the mansion, which is more nefarious looking than expected, and no sign of Mario anywhere. Upon entering the mansion, Luigi encounters a ghost and is saved by Professor E. Gadd, who gives him the Poltergust 3000 vacuum and sends him on his way to find Mario, who is trapped in a painting by King Boo, and that's pretty much it. Luigi ends up finding the antagonist, rescues Mario, and goes home to his new house, the size of which depends on how much gold was accumulated during the game. So overall, I enjoyed my time with Luigi's Mansion and again ended up getting an E rank after about 6 hours or so. I found the graphics to be exceptional, especially for the time of release, which it's hard to believe that it was 25 years ago if I'm being honest. Textures are smooth and pixelation is kept to a minimum except for some environmental elements. The atmosphere is as you would expect a haunted but Nintendo whimsical mansion to be, and the rooms do a decent job of serving as their own environment. The music and sounds were pretty good. The music does a decent job of meeting the theme of the game, while I did find some of the sounds to get annoying over time. The gameplay was fun, but definitely not perfect. The controls and late game backtracking did subtract from the overall experience for me. I give Luigi's Mansion a solid 7 out of 10, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing improvements in the sequels. More than anything, I'm really just glad to cross this one off of a ginormous backlog of games spanning back to the early 2000s. Thank you so much for coming by, and I want to say that I really appreciate the time invested into my content. Please drop a like and even consider commenting or subscribing, as I am getting close to that 1,000 subscriber milestone. I hope 2026 is off to a good start for you, and we'll see you in the next video.